Hi, everybody. Welcome to Rett U's Web Chat. I am Courtney Barnum. I am the The training coordinator and a Rett U coach at Rett University. And my wonderful, amazing mentor and business partner is Miss Susan Norwell. And she's just amazing and awesome and all those other wonderful words that we say about her. And tonight, we're going to be talking about progress and what does it look like. Because especially for our kiddos, progress looks different. And coming from, I don't know how many of you know my background, but my sister actually had Rett syndrome and lived with Rett syndrome for 51 years. And this quote, "Comparison is the thief of joy," is one of my favorites, being a Rett sib. Back when I was younger and we were first starting the Rett journey in terms of getting to know other people because the internet was out, there was another young lady who had Rett syndrome, and we did the pictures for the Rett conference every year. And she would be skiing and she would be horseback riding and she would be doing all these things that my sister couldn't do. And my other friend whose sister also had Rett syndrome. And I'm not going to lie, we were younger and not so nice at that time. We were like, she was the perfect little Rett girl, that she could do all this stuff that our sisters couldn't do. And it made us angry. Now, of course, growing up and being much more mature now, you know, I see it in a completely different...
What's your anger behind?
I see it in a different perspective because, of course, I understand where my anger was coming from at that point and just wanting my sister to be able to do things. But I was thinking about it as I've been working with clients over, you know, this year and things like that, especially, you know, we are on social media. We see all these things that show what other kids are doing. And I think sometimes we look at it and go, well, my child can't do that, or my kiddo can't do that, or my sister or brother can't do that. And it can sometimes take the joy out of what they can do. So Susan and I just wanted to talk about why we need to stop comparing what other people do. Yes, take note of what other kids are doing, what other people are doing, but make sure that we are looking at what our child is doing. So tonight we're going to be talking about what does communication and education progress look like for our loved ones with complex needs. Miss Susan, would you like to take over?
Sure. Unless you want to do communication, I'll do education.
That sounds good. We can do that.
We'll split it up. I think that's a good idea.
All right.
I'm talking all the time, so yeah.
Okay. So what does our communication progress look like for our loved ones with complex needs, Rett syndrome, and all those other wonderful things? It's going to look different for every child, and we do need to remember that. We need to make sure that we are looking for the little things and noticing them. I'm working with a young lady who, when I started with her, literally I think had 4 buttons, maybe 5 buttons on her device, and she's now using, the larger, more robust language things. And when we first started, she was really great at going for the middle. Like her eyes, she could go for those middle, but going to those outer edges and the outer edges and the corners was much harder for her. So she's getting to those now and she's really starting. So that's a huge step. The other thing that, one of my other kiddos has a huge issue with apraxia. She's trying so hard to get to where she wants to be, and she's getting close enough. And we're seeing it with the outline of the button. We're getting to see where her eyes are going. So she's getting closer. The keys to progress for our communication for our kiddos is to remember, we need to have belief in our child and their ability. No matter what age they are, we really need to believe in them and their ability, because that gives them the confidence to push themselves a little bit harder. They have to have...
Can I add something? You said something so important, and she just kind of slid it in there, that she can see where the child's eyes are going, even if the device doesn't talk. And it's because we did this a couple of webinars ago, but there are settings on all the devices so that you can make the buttons light up the minute their eyes are on it, even if they don't hold it long enough for it to talk. And for a beginner, somebody who's just learning a system, it is so affirming when you're able to say, "Oh, I think you're trying to tell me. I saw your eyes get to excited. Are you trying to tell me excited?" And all of a sudden they're going, "Yeah, did you even notice?" "Yeah, I noticed." That's the tricky part, is I think that instead of comparing, what we need to do is be ever present.
Exactly.
Just really, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a great thing to mention.
Well, and I worked with a young lady today for the first time. And again, she's on a PRC, and she was using 45, and we moved her up to 84 today. And her little eyes, when she saw all those buttons today, was like, oh my gosh. But the nice thing is on the PRC, it outlines it in red. And so she wasn't looking at it long enough that it was activating, but it was red, so I could see it. So I'm watching her where she's going, and I'm making comments to everything she's saying. And that, like you said, Susan, her eyes and she sat up a little bit straighter. She just got more and more excited about, then her eyes started going everywhere, because then she was like, oh, wait a second. She's listening to me. She's responding to me. Oh my gosh. So make sure that we're responding and reacting to their communication. Acknowledge what they said is heard. Always presume intention. I think one of the hardest things I've heard is when people say, oh, she didn't mean to do that, or he didn't mean to do that, right in front of them. And I'm like, wow, if I had somebody saying that to me all the time or in front of me all the time, I would shut down. And so we always want to presume, and I even if it's completely off topic, I will say, oh, you were telling me about the cat that was chasing the banana. Oh my gosh, that's such a great story. And, and presuming that they meant to use those words. Like we said, watch where their eyes go, and always make meaning to whatever they're saying. Because remember, our girls and boys with complex needs take their cues from the people around them. The more we show that we are listening and that we are responding to them and that we are present with them, the more that they are going to give back to us. I noticed that when I trialed Toby with my sister for the first time at the age of 50. Her eyes were everywhere. And once she realized that we were responding to her, especially the day we FaceTimed with my other sister for the first time, she made so many comments. It was just absolutely amazing. And we mapped meaning to everything that we possibly could. And that made her want to talk to us even more. So that when it came time to talk about getting her a Toby and returning the trial device, she looked at me like, yes, you better buy me a Toby, or else I'm going to be really mad at you. So just, always remember they take their cues from us.
And so when we're looking here, back up. Can you go backwards?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Boy, that's a white one. Oh.
Sorry.
So think about the fact that in the very beginning, for some kiddos, even looking at their device is progress. And I will tell you that's even more important for adults. So I got just worked with a 49-year-old who got her first device. And in the beginning, she didn't look at it. I mean, it's a miracle we got it covered. It's a miracle. She wasn't even hardly looking at it. I mean, I caught her on video doing so many things and sent it to the speech therapist, so we got the device written and covered by Medicaid. But the deal was that even increased regard for a device is progress. Mm-hmm. And so if we have in our minds that they're going to get this thing that we've worked so hard to get, and all of a sudden they're going to just spill their whole lives to us, is not exactly reality. I think the only time we see kids really chatty is like when a 2-year-old gets a device, because they have no idea of what is right and wrong. They just go for it. But anybody older than like 6, 7, 8 has got a pretty good sense of what right and wrong is. So I look at one of the things that I think is pretty cool about Snap and Communicator is that they have this little bar you can set so that you can see when their eyes are in a good placement. And I have a girl I'm working with where I say to her on a regular basis, man, you are spending way more time in the green, which means she's spending more time in a spot where she's able to access her device. That's progress. And so I think sometimes we look for this kind of pie in the sky progress. And I just want you to know, I know a lot of people who post on Facebook, and I know what their kids are doing. And you're seeing the best of what their kids are doing. Nobody's showing you the hard days of what they're doing. It's kind of like people when they cook dinner and then they take a picture of it. You'll never see me doing that because, mine just don't look that good. And so I think that's the other thing is just kind of get an idea about try to loosen up a little bit and have fun and really try to notice those little changes, because those little changes add up to a lot. So this girl that I'm talking about, where she wasn't even looking at her device, that looking at her device she was basically screaming most of the time and not looking at her device. It's a bad combo. And today, how much time she spent talking to me, like a year and a half later of these remotes, well, since shutdown, so since March to now, is now she is just telling me things. She's putting words together. She's making sentences, and I'm just sitting there going, I'm so glad I videotape all the time, because you can look and see the progress over time, but it was not fast, and it was not instantaneous, and it didn't come with a lot of me just modeling and noticing the little things that mattered and saying, wow, I really see that you're holding that button long enough. I could look away and I could hear what you had to say. Just that kind of really descriptive language that helps them know that what they're doing is having an effect. So, okay. I know these are just supposed to be a half hour and then I get going. All right. So educational progress. All right. So we're always going to be looking for little things, because little things become big things. So do kids stay engaged for longer? So I'm starting to look at, I happen to have right now 5 kindergartners that I'm seeing remotely that are all going to kindergarten. Obviously, the kindergartners going to kindergartners. It's kind of rare for me to have all 5 kids the same age. And it's nice for me to kind of see the differences in engagement and how long they can work. And some can work for 5 minutes before they need a break, and some can work for the whole hour and they don't need a break. So different. But the ones that can only work for 5 minutes are now working for 10, are now working for 15. The ones that had to have me constantly co-regulating with them. Wow, I just got an echo for a moment. Hey, Crystal Fernandez, can you turn off your microphone just in case that's what it is? You hear it echo, or is it just me?
No, I hear it as well.
Are you hearing it echo? I'm hearing it echo.
I hear it. I'm going to fix it.
Okay. So I think that, this idea of how long they're staying engaged, how do they stay regulated? In other words, are you constantly having to co-regulate with them? Talking to them about how, this is hard and I know you can do it. And all of that kind of massaging that we do to help them stay regulated. Is somebody constantly popping food in their mouths while they're working so they can stay regulated? How much less of what that can we do over time, which I think is important if they're going to survive at school? Do they follow instruction visually for longer periods of time? Our girls are great, and boys are great auditorily. They pick up everything auditorily right away. But I am getting more kids that have visual processing problems. And I'm noticing kids and adults that cannot listen and look at the same time. That they have that dual processing is hard. So can they? The only reason I'm kind of talking about her is because there's just been this huge amount of progress. But I can remember even struggling to get her to look at my modeling. And now I just say, if you look, I'm going to show you where this new word is. And she will look right away to get there. So for me, that's real progress, because I know that I can't model and get her to use words if she doesn't look at my modeling. Do the kiddos use yes and no more reliably? So in the beginning, what we really know is that yes and no is based on agreement to begin with. So kids first agree or disagree, which is the easiest thing. So you say something they like and they look right at you. And you can put that onto a yes and no symbol. And then later on, we ask them questions, hopefully not things like, what is this color, blue or red? We don't do any of that because that's just boring and awful. But I have kids now taking multiple choice tests after they've read a passage so that I know what level they're reading at. That yes and no comes in handy. Do they request favorite books? Do they laugh at the funny parts? Can they sit through, and whether they're sitting, standing, next to you, whatever, can they tolerate getting through a book that lengthwise would be age appropriate? I'm not talking about War and Peace. I couldn't get through War and Peace, but I'm talking about, kids' books that are great. And I have a lot of books that my adults like that are adult-oriented picture books that are great. Will they use an ABC flip book for playing and then for writing? That's real progress. Will they sit still for you to flip through, and they'll make choices between abstract things called letters, and then you're going to play a video that's got an ABC song on it. And later, can you transfer that? Then maybe, I need you to sign Grandma's card. It's Mother's Day. And they give you 3 letters and you write it down. That's real progress over time. That less crying and more regulation is huge. And this varies across kids. I have some kids that would no more think about crying about anything than, the man in the moon. But I have other kids that come crying. That is their mode of operation. And for them, you have to do a lot of co-regulating to get them calmed down and working with you. You start to look at, are there more spaces between the crying? That's progress. Do they learn letters, sounds? Do they learn to read and write? What does that progress look like? Well, in the beginning, I have kids reading these really easy readers. And if they just get their eyes on the print and it lights up, I'm like, oh, yeah, they're looking at the print, not just the picture. And pretty soon, they're looking at it from left to right. Now, sometimes I force them to look at it from left and right because I set up the book so a button comes up they have to look at, and that triggers the next button to come up and the next button to come up, and pretty soon they're tracking, and then I can move them off of the device and I can move them onto something like Voice Stream on an iPad, and they're still tracking the print. And so you see these little changes in what they're doing and in their desire to do it. Really hard to work with kids or even adults who don't want to learn. I could go into that on a whole webinar on dealing sometimes with teachers who don't want to learn. But if we can get that learning engagement up, that's really progress. But I think what we have to also be is really consistent in our instruction. What does our instruction look like? If I want kids to follow my instruction, if I want them to visually orient to what I do, I better be doing something fun and great and interesting. Not to say that I'm not teaching kids to read, write. There's no negotiation there. But I had this kiddo just recently where I said, okay, we just moved up to level C, and now you need to pick some new books, and I'm only going to do the books that you think you're going to like. She picked out 6 books, 3 fiction, 3 nonfiction. She's been so engrossed in those books because she has some investment in them, and she's really doing a good job reading. So we have to be consistent in our instruction. We have to set high expectations, I think, but I think we also have to know how to get to those expectations. And I think the last thing I want to say about educational process is that progress is that school is not just a caretaking place. I was in a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and the teacher was very sweet and said, we just love her to pieces. And I said, I'm happy you love her to pieces, but your job is to educate her. Her parents will love her. Your job is to educate her. I like that you love her also, but really, you're not educating her. She's not being taught to read and write. She's not being taught. So I said it nicer than that, I think. Maybe not. but I feel really strongly that if we don't push schools on what their role is, that we can end up with a child that comes out of school that graduates at 22, or if you're in Michigan at 26, and doesn't know how to read and write. Right. And for individuals with Rett, there is no excuse for that. I have not met a single one that doesn't learn to read or write yet. So that's what progress looks like to me. It looks like that the goals I've set, I've broken down into little pieces, and they're making those little pieces, and I'm letting them know they're making those little pieces. So, and I video everything. And the reason I video everything is because sometimes you forget what they looked like before.
That is a huge one for me as well, Miss Susan, is I have to video. I like going back and looking at where my kids started with my clients, and then looking at where they are now is really when you see the change in what kind of progress they've made. Because it's hard to see it in a weekly, when you see them all the time.
I think it's also important to send to parents.
Yes.
So if parents, even if parents are in there, when they're in there, a session with you, I think they're so everybody brings their baggage to everything. And I think they're worried that their kids are going to do well for me, or they're concerned that they're not going to know what to do. And I think sometimes they miss things just because of their own anxiety. And I think that then when you send them a video and say, here, this is what she did today. Here's a snippet of the success she's made. You know, I have families that say, oh, we sit down with the whole family. We invite the grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles. We all get popcorn and we watch this. And I think that that's really honoring the child, but it's also giving them a chance to feel like, okay, even though this disorder is really complex and it's not exactly a walk in the park for anybody, I don't want to give that impression. My kid's making progress. My kiddo's doing things they weren't doing before. And that's a really good feeling, I think, for parents and for us, actually, too. So, oh gosh.
So, hindrances to progress. The things that make our kids not have progress. Very simply, the two most important ones, if they have a limited vocabulary and if we are not modeling, and if everybody's not modeling. It is not just up to mom and dad. It is not just up to the teachers. It's everybody on your child's team, everybody who's on your loved one's team, to model as much as possible. As uncomfortable as it is for us, I think, because I think as adults we think too much and we get in our head. And when we were modeling, I know when I first started doing this, I had a much harder time modeling. Now I'm getting, with more and more practice, getting better. But if everybody's not modeling, your child is not going to learn their new language. So having that limited vocabulary and the no modeling is definitely going to be a huge hindrance to their progress.
So I'm going to stretch modeling out to include modeling reading and modeling writing.
Yep.
I think we need to be reading next to our kids, showing them our interest in books and the kinds of things that we read. And I also think they need to see us writing.
Yes.
I think they need to watch us write, and I think they need to see us using their tools. So if they need an APP flip book, if they need an eye gaze frame, whatever they're writing with, I think we need to use it and model it. And that, again, is going to feel a little weird and maybe a little contrived, but we don't feel bad about picking up a pencil.
Nope.
But if our kiddo only sees a pencil, then they're like, well, you're not quite talking my language.
Right.
And we need only have us talking at them and not communicating with them on their device. It's like, well, I can't quite do that mouth thing that you're doing. So the more we model across the board, I model so much about emotional content. Like what does it make you feel like you can't?
Oh my goodness.
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Who is talking? Somebody's honored. There we go. Thank you, Crystal. So I think it's really important that we even model emotional processing, or we talk about the things we don't really want to even think about, like everybody's at a family party and everybody's running around and our kid's in a wheelchair, and they might be looking at it and you're going, I know. Sometimes don't you just wish you could just get out of that chair and run? Mm-hmm. I'm with you. I wish that could be for you also. And I think when we don't say those things, when we left them unsaid, I don't think that kids necessarily understand that we understand. I don't spend all day, every day talking about it, but I have a lot of kids that the minute you kind of open up about that, teenagers in particular, you get to be like 10 to 13, 14 years old, and they're like, Rett sucks. It's like, I get it. And you need to have somebody that you can spill that to. And then you need to have somebody say, okay, it sucks. Now what are we going to do? What kind of a Rett person and we know it sucks. We're all agreeing with you. But what are we going to do about it? And I think that's the next frontier. We've got this AAC thing, I think, down in terms of more people getting devices and more people getting access to communication. Not great. I'm not saying we're great by any stretch of the imagination, but I think we're way better. I think where we're not as good yet is understanding that these are people who are just like every other teenager or every other 10-year-old, every other 5-year-old that has feelings.
Yes.
I made a horrible mistake last week.
Sorry.
I made a horrible mistake last week. I have this adorable book that's called How to Babysit Your Grandmother. And as I'm reading it to this little 5-year-old, because she has a great relationship with her grandmother, I thought it'd be great. But as I'm reading it, I'm realizing all the things they're doing, she can't do. She has good enough communication that she said, this is sad. I don't like this. I can't do this. And I said, we're chucking the book, and I am really sorry. This book, I didn't need to remind you of the things you can't do. And I'm sorry. And then we had a discussion about that. We talked about that. But I felt like, Norwell, what an idiot. Okay, go ahead, Courtney.
Another area, hearing people say things like, I don't think she meant to say that, or I don't think she knows she knows how to use their device, or I don't think they understand. That was one of the things I picked up, I think, the best from my sister, is watching her and watching her reaction to people who talked about her in front of her. And it's something that I was very lucky to have her, because when I started teaching, I would always say to my kids, like if I was going to talk to their mom or dad about, something that happened at school that day, I would say, so-and-so, I'm going to talk to mom and dad about what happened today and talk about you. And it's not a bad thing. We're just talking. And is that okay? And I would ask their permission of it, because they are human beings. And when we talk about them like they're not listening, or we say things like, I don't think he or she meant to say that, or we talk about them in front of them like they are not understanding, they hear everything, they understand everything, and that definitely makes them withdraw. Stress and pressure. I know as family members, I did it to my sister myself when we were trialing her Toby. We want to hear them talk, and we are so, we add extra stress and pressure to it, which then of course kicks the apraxia into overdrive, and then it creates this cycle. So, as much as we want to, and we have to kind of check ourselves at the door and check our personalities at the door, so that we're not pushing our stress and pressure onto the kiddos.
I do a lot of like, you know what? I'm going to give you a new book today. It's a little bit harder. And sometimes I hear people say, when it's new, it's a little bit scary and I get nervous. And then I also sometimes hear people say they get excited when they see something new. And then there are people that are excited and nervous when they get something new. And I don't have to point any fingers, but I open the door to the fact that feeling any of those emotions are fine. And then when they tell me they're nervous, I said, I so get it. So we're going to do it nervous.
Yeah.
And when we do it nervous, it means that I'm going to help you a little more, and we're going to take our time, but we're going to do it nervous, because nervous is not going to stop us. But when we acknowledge it's there, it's not like there's a dead elephant in the middle of the room we're all stepping over. It's there in the middle of the room. Let's talk about it. And I think what it does is it decreases the nervousness.
Yeah.
Because they're sitting there wondering, what the heck is this feeling? And we're like, some people, and you don't have to say you just some people, I'm wondering about this.
Yeah.
It's like the Fred Rogers imitation. If y'all want to watch a great podcast, watch the podcast Finding Fred Rogers. It's exactly what everybody needs to listen to right now at this time in our lives. I feel like I need to channel my inner Fred when I'm working with people.
All right, so other hindrances to progress: inconsistent interaction. Of course, device being used for academics. You put academics on our kiddos' devices, they are going to shut down. We can talk about academics, like we can talk about the book, we can talk about the topic that we're talking about, but we are not going to do the show me, A, B, C, or D. Do this, show me this, tell me this on their device, because that's not what it's for. It's for communication. Boredom is a huge, huge hindrance to our kiddos' progress. If they're bored, if they're being asked, like my one of my kiddos' moms told me that her teacher tried to we wrote a beautiful IEP last year, and the new teacher tried to put the will identify shapes goal back on her 16-year-old's IEP this year. That's not what that 16-year-old needs. She's bored in class. That's why she's falling asleep. I know of another child who was sleeping during the day because she was bored. And, we have to give them lots of fun things to do and lots of interactive things that attract them and show them that we know that they're in there. Lack of explicit praise. This is huge. You can say good job all day long, but they might not be associating it with what you are praising them for. So I love how you're getting your eyes over the corner. Awesome job. I love how you're trying so hard. That explicit praise really helps them understand what they're getting praised for and what we want to do more of. And of course,
because they don't get very good feedback from their bodies.
Nope.
It's not like their body's got this great feedback loop going. In fact, there's not a great loop going for their body at all, whether it's feedback or anything else. And so somebody says good job and they're like, okay, what part of me are you talking about?
Exactly.
What did I do that you liked? Because I'm not sure what I did. I'm not sure.
Well,
and when I think about that, I think about how if somebody was to say, oh, I noticed you're really looking at your device more, you kind of see this little grin where they go, oh my gosh, I am looking at my device more. Like, that's what this is? That's what I'm supposed to be doing? Yes, that is what you're supposed to be doing. Without me telling you, because the minute I tell you to do it, then you're going to get nervous and your apraxia is going to go. So we have to be it's like stealth. Sometimes I feel like I'm stealth. I'm like a stealth spot.
Yes.
I've got to figure out how I'm going to have them do something without acting like it really matters, because if it matters, then, oh my gosh, they're going to get nervous about it. I just have to, be casual at all times.
Cool as a cucumber. That's our job. So, and of course, lack of meaningful instruction with lots of assessment. If all we're doing is assessing the kids, if all we're doing is giving them stupid academics that really have no wherewithal on anything that they're going to be, that's going to be important to them, that communication and literacy piece, then that's going to impede their progress. They're not going to want to make progress because it doesn't mean anything to them. Why are you assessing me all the time? Why are you asking me all these questions? Why are you giving me, shapes and colors and, things like that? I was in an IEP a couple of weeks ago where they were wanting my kiddo to identify sight words, but they were safety words. We'll identify exit and enter. And I looked at her mom and dad and I said, is she going to be going any place without an adult anytime soon that she needs to know these safety words? Or would it be more important for her to have a goal for her sight words? And, it's those kinds of things. We have to think about those kinds of things because that, safety words don't mean anything to our kids, right? It doesn't mean anything.
Well, I don't think you need to read the word fire extinguisher to know what it's for. Exactly. I don't read the word. I mean, if there's a fire, I'm going to grab the thing and I'm going to point it at the fire, and that's it. I don't even need to know what it's called. But the reality is, if you're never going to pick up a fire extinguisher, if you're never going to look for an exit door so you can get to it, we've now spent a lot of time on these very hard words, and people are mad at us because we're trying to do bat, fat, cat, and sat. So I just find that to be ridiculous. That would be my sense of it. All right.
I agree with you completely. Let me turn the page, Miss Susan.
All right, so supports. I don't know if we've said modeling enough, but certainly there has to be modeling across the board in terms of language and academics. We want to presume potential. So this is the part that's really tricky, is because I do think that our kids get a bad rap, largely due to the fact they don't talk and they can't use their hands. And I think that teachers, that's kind of where that line gets drawn. If somebody's nonverbal, but they can point to things, people know what to do with those kids. It's when they're nonverbal and they can't point to things that people get all wigged out and have no idea what to do. And I still am always shocked at the fact that people don't know that there is a Rett University and they could actually take courses and they could learn what to do. But that is the case. That we want natural conversation with them, not questions all the time. I do not let speech therapists put will answer WH questions on an IEP, because I don't want to make my kids into boring dinner partners, because that was like going to dinner with my mother. She asked me questions all the time. What are you doing? Where are you going? What's going? And I love my mother dearly, but that's what mothers do. But that's not what friends do when they get together. Friends, when they get together, tell stories about what's going on in their life. And so we need that. I have this little girl who I started with at 2.5. She is now 3. I have a 20-minute conversation about what's going on in her life and my life at the beginning of our session. I'm blown away with the back and the forth and the fact that she has this very natural conversation with me. And I think that's going to stand her in better stead than her answering WH questions, because she knows how to have a conversation. Patience. I think patience is important. I do. I think that more important than patience is creativity. I really think that people have to start thinking outside the box for our kiddos and our adults, because they need people that can problem solve and can figure out the next step and a creative way to get there. We have to know it's okay to make mistakes. Today I'm doing a writing activity with one of my girls. She's writing a takeoff on the story Nothing Ever Happens on 90th Street, and her title was Nothing Ever Happens in a Pandemic. And between her ABC flipbook and word prediction, she's like on her 3rd paragraph of this wonderfully imaginative story. And on her device, I have this big page where, in case I miss her yes, no, which is very hard, she has really some strabismus with her eyes, she can say, hey, you made a mistake. And today, I made a couple of mistakes. She knows it's okay to make a mistake, and she knows it's okay to call me on it. And whether it was her mistake or my mistake, it's always my mistake. That's the key. Take the blame.
Yes. All
all the time. Low stress activities, and really, if you're not silly, you need to get some silly. You need to have fun. I can remember my mom, God love her, she lived to be 99 and 11 months old. And I would sometimes do videos. Like when I was with her, I would just like cut up videos and show her things I was doing. She goes, you have a good time doing your job. Yeah, I do. I have a great time doing my job. Somebody the other day asked me, they said, how are you? I said, I'm just great. I've had the greatest day. I have the greatest job. I love what I do. And he looked at me and he went, what do you do? I told him what I did. He goes, you love that? I said, oh man, it's the best job ever. And when it stops being the best job ever, I need to stop doing this job.
I get the same thing. People are like, my kids are awesome. And I'm like, it's so much fun to watch these guys, what they do. And it's amazing. So yeah, silliness is completely part of the
And I think that it's helpful for me when I train teachers to bring that to the table, because I think sometimes in schools, it's not their fault. There's all this pressure on assessment that drives me bonkers. But I think sometimes we just have to remind them these are kids. Have a good time with them. If you were in a gen ed classroom, the teacher would be having fun. She wouldn't be acting like a sergeant, a drill sergeant. So read between the lines. When you look up at kids and what they're saying sometimes, if you take it really literally, you're trying to make sense out of it. But the other day, that one of my girls who rarely speaks in sentences just was going on and on and on. And at one point I paused her and I said, okay, let me catch up with you because I think I'm a little behind. I'm going to look at this chunk. Is this what you were trying to tell me? And she was like, yes. And then I got to the next chunk. Is this what you're trying to tell me? Yes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she was telling me, putting together so many ideas that I was able to kind of, again, be creative, use your imagination. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. They'll tell you no if you mess up, which is good. Willingness to learn. I was talking to a school today, a superintendent of special ed, and the child was there because the superintendent was watching our session, and we were talking about going to high school, and that she told me she was nervous, and I said, well, here's why I'm not nervous. Your school has a bunch of learn-it-alls instead of know-it-alls, and they want to learn about you. And that's what makes me comfortable about a kid going to a school. And that reciprocity then runs through the whole thing, runs through reciprocity with students, reciprocity between team members, reciprocity between the family in school, between administration in school. There's got to be that willingness to learn and to know that none of us know it all. I don't know it all. I'm learning all the time. Every time I get a new kid who just presents with a different way, I learn something new. So if you have any questions, you are welcome to email us, and we will get back to you. We actually answer emails. And does anybody have any questions before we sign off? If You can turn your mic on if you want to and ask a question. Y'all are such just quiet listeners.
So we're happy that you guys came. If you guys have any ideas.
You have a question?
Oh, go ahead, Cricket.
Well, I was going to say, I'm not going to be bashful. I'm going to jump in.
Go for it.
I'm actually an educator who, I understand that it's rare that I would have 2 young ladies in our district that have Rett syndrome.
Wow.
Very rare.
So I have one at high school and one at middle school. The high school student I've been with since first grade.
And where are you located?
I'm in Hampton, Virginia, in Hampton City Schools.
Okay.
So I'm
So glad you're not
I want to be a learn-it-all because I'm always looking for, am I doing this right? What can I do better? How can I be more effective, efficient? How can I be more helpful? How can I help them to be more successful? So one of the things that I do want to, because this is my first time jumping in, a parent actually shared this information, so I'm going to try to make sure I jump in more often. You had, one of the things that you mentioned was not using the device for education.
No, not for academics. So in other
Academic, yeah.
So put a device into a worksheet. So think about if you're in a classroom and a child has, a neurotypical child has a worksheet. They can fill out the worksheet and they can still talk.
Right.
But the minute you put a worksheet on a device, they lose their way to talk. And now they have to use their eyes to answer, which is not always the easiest thing to do. I always challenge people, sit in front of your kid's device and try to do something on it. It's hard.
Right.
Now I'm doing about...
Which I have done. I've tried, I do try to do that with our girls.
So I'm doing like 10 hours of remotes a day since COVID. And I will tell you that my eyes are taking a toll.
Yes.
And so now I have this great sympathy and empathy for my kids who are on eye gaze all the time. The one exception is I do something, I make beginner books on it so they can track print and I can see them tracking. And then I move them into another way of reading books once they're doing that. But they have language all around those pictures and the things that they're reading. And they have access to the rest of their device. But I would never put up 5 numbers and say, fine, where's number 5? Where's number 7? I would do that low tech with a yes/no board, something that looks like this.
Yes.
And if I needed to assess them on their numbers or their letters, I might say, you know what? I got 3 letters here. Here's 3 letters. And we're going to be looking for letter B. Now that I probably wouldn't do that because I wouldn't put the B and D together, but they just happen to be there. And then I would put them back and I would take them down one at a time and say, okay, I'm going to do them in that order. Is that the letter B? And they should look at the no, or they should use their no, whatever their no is. And I always sit on the yes side so that they can look at me for yes or look to the yes. So I start out with 2 choices and then I go to 3 choices, but that's called partner assisted scan. And actually, if you want to learn a lot of stuff, I would go to Rett University. We have a lot of free stuff there of the webinars and things that we've done that are free. They're all posted there. But also
Right.
we have some courses that do cost more money, but then we have courses that are really inexpensive on teaching reading, teaching writing, how to model, like a whole course on modeling on a device with soft tech and modeling modeling with soft tech and modeling on a device. There's a lot
So
of...
is the reading and the teaching, writing their courses I would need to pay for?
So there are courses that you would have to pay for. Did we do a lesson on writing? One of our COVID lessons?
I don't think we did.
I don't think so either. We did a lot of free COVID lessons every week during when everybody was shut down. We did a free in a week that showed resources and how to do things. There's a lot of how-tos there, but I have not met any school district that refused to buy a course. They're really not that expensive.
They're not expensive.
$35,
Yeah.
$40, $50, and you own it for a year, so anybody can look at it. We don't keep track of how many people look at it. You know, we've got better things to do than police our courses that way. But it just might help you. get some information.
Cricket, if you want to email me at Courtney@gp2c.org, and we can do some supports. Yeah, the bottom one.
Okay.
The bottom one.
Well, with the young men since first grade, I've done throughout the years, I've tried, and I have to be honest with you, I worked in corporate America and was a career switcher, and I had never worked with anyone who had a disability. So this was all new for me. And just by jumping in and with her and figuring it out and, you know, what worked, what didn't work, you know, and eventually it came to where I was training other people how to work with these young ladies. I was training their one-to-ones, which is where I am now. I'm training teachers, training the ones, training different staffs on how to work with. So some of the things you were talking about, I was like, yes, I'm getting it right? I've done right. Good. So I'm like those people. I know it all. I'm a learner. I want to learn more. I want to know, okay, I've done this, but how can I get her? How do I take her to the next step? Or how do I, move along?
If you email Courtney and then you have a discussion about where you want to go next, we could direct you best on what courses or what books to read or what research you have that could support you. And just, I applaud you because
yes, we love that.
I love when our girls get learn it all. It's the best. It's the best.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I've seen a lot of progress. I also see the spectrum. You know, I think sometimes that people fail to realize that just because this one's at this level doesn't they're all going to be at this level. I see the different level with our girls.
Right.
So learning what worked with this one, okay, it doesn't necessarily work with this one. So how do I tweak this that I'm reaching this one and helping her to be successful? That's kind of where I'm at.
And that's the fun part.
That's the fun.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. Good night, everybody. We are really happy.
Thank you so much, ladies. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
So welcome. You too. Bye.
Good luck to everyone.
Did you get your device fixed yet, Christy?
Yes, we just got it back. I was just going to email you. Like, we have our original device back in action.
Yay!
Oh my
Far come a line.
Okay. So I have a client who sent her device in to be fixed. It came back with a cracked screen. The box is in perfect condition. It did not happen in transit.
Oh my.
Somehow it cracked, and they put it in the box and sent it back. I'm like,
The one
oh my gosh.
was they did give us a bunch of new batteries.
Well, good.
Went ahead and swapped them all out, which had nothing to do with why it was sent in, but that was a bonus.
There you go. All right. Super. All right. Good night, ladies.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
At least to see your names. Bye-bye.
Bye.